Hello, my name is William, the Avid reader, and today I'm reviewing It, written by Stephen King in 1986. So some of you might wonder, why haven't you done a video in 3 weeks? It's because It is a big book, it's 1400 pages, and this has taken me 3.5 weeks to read. So yeah, reading It and then reading some other big book, that's gonna take you a while, so no videos during the Christmas break, so sorry about that, but anyway, yeah. So It is one of Stephen King's most famous book. It's his second to largest book behind The Stand. And it's about this clown who comes every 25 years or so, every quarter century or so, and kills a bunch of people in Derry, Maine. There are a group of characters of 7, called the Losers Club kind of, who have to kill it to survive. So they try to kill it in 58, don't really succeed. And then it comes back in 85, I think it is, so they have to kill it again. It's written in 5 parts, and there are then also 5 interludes. This are basically by Mike Hamlin, this African-American guy, who's become a librarian after the first round of events, and it ends with an epilogue. So part 1, we get to see the deaths of 1957 and 1984. The book starts with Georgie's death, and Georgie is the brother to Bill. It's raining, he's playing with a paper boat, going down the street. It's heavily raining, so the water carries it, and it goes down into the sewers. Georgie can't get it, and then he sees a clown in the sewers called, referred to It, and they talk about Ronald McDonald and some other clowns multiple times to describe It, and it's called It, or there's Bob Gray is its real name maybe. Describes himself as Pennywise, the dancing clown. And they talk a little bit, describe that it smells like popcorn down there, there's a lot of things. And then when Jory thinks he's going to get his boat, it grabs him and starts making this speech about everyone floats, you'll float too, and then kills him. Adults run outside and see that the boy is dead. And this causes his brother Bill to get the cold shoulder from his parents. So the interesting thing with this book is it's not just a horror book about a clown killing people, and by the way, it's not only a clown, it takes multiple shapes. It's also about some true horror stories, so you can see Bill, for example, gets the cold shoulder from his parents. They don't really care about him. So that's the death in 57. Then the death of 84, where there's gay guy in there that gets killed under the kissing bridge where homosexuals go regularly and kiss or something. And the thing is that they are attacked by this group of 3 homophobes. One of them is a bit less violent than the others. So in these groups of people who are bullies who attack other people, there tends to be one who kind of has second doubts about it, and thus goes less extreme than the others. But anyways, so they assault this pair of gay guys. One of them, he looks at them from afar, he doesn't get beat up really by them, but the other, he gets beat up and thrown over the bridge into the water. And as he's swimming, there's a clown there, there's a bunch of balloons, and I think the clown bites him several times in different places. He's basically shredded in many places. And the 3 boys are prosecuted for having killed this teenager. So the cops, they're also homophobic, but they don't think you should kill gay people. These teenagers, or I'm not sure if they're teenagers, no, they're not teenagers, they're young adults. They all agree on the events that they saw some clown. And one cop tells the other, yeah, there might be some clown, but they say it's going to be harder. Prosecute, it's not worth it, nobody's gonna believe you, they're gonna think we're crazy. Let's just prosecute these guys who probably contributed to the death of an innocent person. Then we get to see these phone calls. So Mike Hanlon, the only one of the adults, because it's the 80s now, who lives in Derry. Everyone has moved away and they've all become rich and successful in their own field, but Mike Hanlon is just a regular librarian, and he starts to making some phone calls. The first phone call, one of them is made to Stan, and Stan is this Jewish guy, and he's got a loving wife. But when he gets this phone call, and we get this from the perspective of his wife, He goes to the bathtub, locks it, which he usually doesn't do, and he didn't even bring a beer. And his wife's starting to think about how there's something wrong, and then when she opens up the door, she sees that he has slit his wrist long way. He has written basically T's in it, a big T in each arm, and they're open like this, and there's blood on the wall here next to the bathtub. He's written under it, and she screams in sadness and horror of shock. We also get to see Beverly. She had an abusive father, so now she's repeated the process by getting an abusive husband. And she says that, and keeping in mind, it's interesting, you get the perspective of other characters. So here we get the perspective of the abusive husband. And she tries to explain to him that she has to go to Derry, Maine, where everything has happened. But he basically starts hitting her. And because she has lit a cigarette, so that's unacceptable to him. So she hits her each time she takes a cigarette and then has sex with her for some manipulating, creepy reason. But this time she resists and they get into a fight, and Tom gets badly hurt and she escapes from the home, calls her friend, and it goes on her way to Derry. Then I think it's Ben we get the perspective on, who's just drunk in a bar. Eddie, he's married to this overprotective wife, as he had a overprotective mom. So she doesn't want him to go, and he runs this taxi cab business, and they talk about driving Al Pacino. And he says, you have to do it, and she stresses about him and wants him to stay, and he tries to do the manipulative, overprotective person, but doesn't work, so he leaves. And we also get to see Richie, who's this comedian guy, so he does a bunch of voices on the phone. And we get to see Bill. And Bill is the main character, you could say, of the story. He's been the leader of this group of 7 kids, and now 7 adults. Married a wife, he's become a writer, and he lives in London. He actually explains to his wife what's going on, and she accepts this. And then he goes and travels to Derry, but she accompanies him. And Tom does the same thing in the background with Beverly. So that's part 1. So part 1 is the introduction to the story. So we get to see 2 murders, one from each generation, and we also get an introduction to the characters, how their lives have been since horrible events have happened, and it's a quarter century later. Then we get so-called interlude, and it's the history of Derry, of Mike investigating all the crazy events of Derry, because there's a lot of murders there. And here we actually get to see the perspective, I think, from Mike. He's wondering if he should call them or not, debating it, seeing there's a bunch of murders. There's a bird chase, but I'm not sure in which interlude, because his fear of it is a bird. We get to part 2. It's childhood basically, so we get the perspective from Ben. So he's someone who enjoys reading, he's good at school. He's bullied by Henry to give him his school notes so that Henry doesn't fail class and have to take summer school, but he refuses. He gets out of class, he talks a bit with his teacher. We get a flashback to the winter where he sees this clown thing, I think, on the ice over a bridge, and coming with a long arm towards him, but he goes away because he's awakened to the real world. Ben, after that last summer school day, he gets beat up by the boys, and Henry is getting ready to kill him with the knife, and the other boys don't really like that. They think it's too far, so they basically let Ben go. Ben is chased by Henry. When Henry falls, Ben hits him a bit, and he hides away. And I think it's Eddie who then gets hit by Henry, this Eddie character who has asthma and he uses his aspirator all the time. So this is when Ben meets up with Bill and Eddie. And Ben is referred to as A-Stack. Bill goes with his bike to get some medicine from the pharmacy. He comes back and they 3 become friends and they start building a dam. We then get to meet some other characters, so we get to see Stan the Man, this Jewish kid. We also get to see Richie, so this comedian who likes to do voices. As a kid he can't really do them well, it sounds bad, but as an adult he does them well. Bill has a stutter, so he's called Stuttering Bill. Richie and Bill visit Neighbor Street, I think, or some street with a creepy house. And they get to see some weird werewolf there. And They are chased by it, and it's referred to as Bill beats the devil, and he's very good on his bike Silver. He travels very fast. We get to see the death of another Eddie, not this asthma kid, but some other one who has lived with an abusive father who killed his brother, but we get to see him killed by some weird thing. And then also Stan goes to that house too, and he gets to see a leper, which tries to... Or is it a leper? I'm mixing up. There's so much. It takes so many forms that it's hard to remember, and it's such a big book that I'm sure I'm gonna leave a lot of events out. Anyway, but I think it was Eddie who goes to some wagon place. I mean, first he sees a hobo there that offers to do some disgusting thing of it, then he sees it doing it, and it's some weird leper, and Eddie barely escapes there and describes the situation. Then there's also, we get to see Beverly with her abusive father, and there's a balloon of blood that explodes. And all of these events that the children are seeing, by the way, it's only them that can see it. So she screams out in horror, her father comes in, he wonders what's happening, and because he sees nothing, he hits her. And then she says it was a spider. Oh yeah, all the girls are scared of spiders, so it's fine. So I wouldn't have hit you then. Yeah, so he hits his daughter, so that's a bastard. So then she gets to meet this group of boys. They go to the cinema together, play cards, things like that. And they agree to clean up that sink of blood so she doesn't have to live with it in horror. And there's also the thing with that Richie and Bill went to Eddie's room because there's a picture there and they see it of Georgie, and he winks, and Bill tries to put his hand in it. He gets kind of cut, but Richie pulls him out of it. So yeah, that's part 2. Then you have the dairy interlude, the second one, and here you get to see I think several things. So there's this Legion of Decency, so it's the KKK of the North, and they hate blacks, and we get to see how they are abused. I think it's in part 2 where we get to see Dick Halloran from The Shining when he's younger, and they're running this bar thing, and there's a fire in there, and I'm not sure if it was Mike's father who was there, but there's a fire and a lot of people are killed. And we get to see a scene of Dick Halloran. I think we also get to see a bird chase between Mike Hamlin and the bird he sees. And we get to see the father's dying. He's laying on his deathbed and he's explaining all these things to Mike. I think a couple years after the events of 58 have happened. And I think it's in this interlude, or is it the next, where he talks about his promise with Butch Bowers. So Butch Bowers came and poisoned his chickens. Mike's Hannon's father came and threatened him, and he got a suit on him, and Butch Bowers had to pay a bunch of money. So Butch Bowers is kind of scared of them. Yeah. And then part 3 is about the grown-ups. So there's a reunion between them, but there's only 6 instead of 7 who's come, since we know that Stan is dead. And they start talking, and then they understand that Stan is not here, there's something more. They open this China cookies, Lucky Charms or something. And there's some horrifying thing in each of them, representing what they fear. Each fear. Then they are told that they should each go on tours. Mike Hanlon is explaining all of this pretty much, but Bill is seen as the leader soon anyways. They go on their tours, so Bill, for example, gets a silver bike. I think it's the same one. Beverly visits her father's house as she has escaped from it previously. She finds a new owner who says that she's the daughter of Bob Gray. She's a beautiful, an old lady, but then becomes horribly disgusting, and she runs away from there. Mike finds Stan Uris's head here or later on, for some reason. And then there's these uninvited guests who arrive. So Audra's traveling, Tom is traveling. She beats up Beverly's friend. She's basically a feminist, but yeah, she doesn't deserve to be beat up like that. She's brutally beat up but survives. And Tom's trying to find Beverly, and both him and Audra get shot by it. Tom is killed. Henry has escaped from the asylum. because he's been put in an asylum because he's been blamed for the death of his father and his friends. The ghost of Victor Chris comes and kills the guard, and he's let out. The Derry Interlude 3, that's the description of some shootout between the cops and the citizens and then some criminals in Derry, and you've got Itzy in there. Part 4 is mostly about the childhood, so it was here we saw Stan Uris's head in the fridge for some reason. There's a rock fight between the Losers Club and Henry and his pals, and the Losers Club's win. It's actually here at the 800 page mark or something, where we get to see that finally the group of 7 together. So it takes the majority of the book, these characters are not together. And they're barely it. I mean, at page 500, 6 of them got introduced to each other as Stan was. But yeah, it's Stephen King likes to take his time with building up characters. So usually when a book is finished for a normal one, it's just started. That's the introduction for Stephen King. So yeah, you get a 500 page introduction in this book, maybe more. They brought out this album, I think it's Bill or Mike who has taken it from his father. They open it, it's a bunch of pictures of Derry. They get to see that it is in different places, and it basically comes alive and threatens them and says he's gonna kill them all. We also get to see Eddie beat up because the bullies got beat in the rock fight, so they beat him up. They put some gravel in him. Some other tries to interfere but doesn't succeed. He's scared of them. Eddie tries to get away, but he's tripped over by another bike, and he gets his arm broken by Henry, and then gets spit on by Patrick. So Patrick is another character we see with the bullies, and he's a sociopath. You'll see soon. So yeah. Oh yeah, and then there's the scene of Patrick. So Patrick's hanging around with these bullies, Henry and his palace. He's crazy, so he's crazier than Henry, and Henry's crazy. He wants to kill people, but Patrick, he's done that since he's very young. So he kills flies. People see him, he has this box where he has flies in it. But actually, when he was younger, when he got a little brother, once he just came, put a pillow on his brother's head, and suffocated him to death. He hesitated, maybe let him breathe again, and then he killed him finally. And he went to watch TV. Nobody ever knew that he killed him. His father considered it for a short moment, but let it go at that. We get to see that Patrick enjoys killing different animals. So he kills all these pets. So he's been killing dogs and cats and putting them in his fridge. And the only thing he's afraid of, he's never really afraid of anything or feels pain, is leeches. And then there's this kind of gay scene where he does something to Henry, and Henry at first enjoys it, but then stops because he's in denial, I think. He leaves Patrick alone. Beverly is watching all of this, and when he opens his fridge to get rid of this cat, I think, because he's afraid that he's gonna get caught now, there's a bunch of leeches, flying leeches, who attack him and kill him, and he's not really in pain, but he doesn't wanna die. And Beverly is seeing all of this in horror. Then we have the fourth Derry interlude, and this is sometimes you get, it's so long, this book, that sometimes for several pages you don't really remember anything, you just read zoning. It's too long, this book, I'm gonna tell you that. And there's this chopping bar incident where a guy basically chops some people up in the bar. Nobody really reacts. One of them gets away of the party he wanted to kill, and he gets arrested and hanged and doesn't really care about it. So that's the fourth interlude. And then the final part, the fifth part, is the showdown. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens before. So the kids are chased by Henry and his friends. Henry's friends, all of them, and his two friends, Victor, Chris, and who has hesitated previously, and Belch Huggins, they're killed. I don't know exactly by what, I think by it. They don't show it in the book for some reason. And we also see how Henry escaped. He found some weird car with the help of Victor, Chris. And then we get to see the double fight between the kids and it. So we get to see it fighting them when they were kids. So you got the 7 of them. And we get also it fighting them when they were adults, where there's only 5 of them, as Henry has come and he's almost killed Mike. He's sent to the hospital and he has to defend himself against some nurse. And then he goes and attacks Eddie. Eddie wins. So there's this showdown between it and the Losers Club, so 7 to 5 people depending on which part. Bill sees this great turtle in an alternative universe or something like that. There's this macro-verse they're in, George is in it somehow, and it's a kind turtle, giant turtle, great turtle, who says to Bill that he knows what he has to do, and he has to repeat these phrases. They repeat a lot of phrases in this book. One of them I hate is that they say beep, beep Richie. They say that for some reason. It's annoying. And Richie calls Eddie Eds. I don't really care about that, but yeah. They fight it the first time, they don't kill it, but they think they have. Bill considers it, but no, it didn't happen, and then they try to get out of there as kids, but they can. So Barry does something to them that's unspeakable. I'm not gonna say it, but yeah, it happens towards the end of the book. It's gonna make you think twice of Stephen King when you read that part. So they get out, and then when they're older, they're fighting it. It's Bill and Richie and Ben who are doing most of the thing. They're crushing the eggs because it is this weird spider thing now instead of this clown. They previously fought it in a haunted house as a wolf. That I forgot to describe because that scene is kind of dull, I think. Eddie's has one arm broken, so his good arm is ripped off by it and he dies, bleeds to death, I think. But they successfully kill it. Bill takes out its heart, if I remember. I think it's Bill, and crushes it, and it dies like that. And there's still 2 hours worth of reading left of the book. There's this heartfelt moment where Beverly and all of them are around as adults and see that Eddie is dead, see Tom is dead, and they get Audra out of there, and they escape successfully. The final interlude, the 5th interlude, is Mike making phone calls and reflecting all of this, and he's written everything down. He remembers, but everyone's having amnesia and losing their memory, and the same thing has happened previously. So after each event like this happens, they lose their memory for some reason, and Mike talks to Richie, who's almost forgotten about him, and he talks to Bill, and Mike and Bill are basically the only ones who have a relationship together left, because they're still in Derry with Audra in recovery. Ben and Beverly went together to Nebraska, and then the epilogue is Bill on his silver taking along Audra and waking her up from that tonic state or something where she's basically half dead, and she's awoken and they love each other. That's how the book ends. How would I rate it by Stephen King? I would say an 8 out of 10. So it's a good book, but there are a lot of flaws with it. The main thing is it's too long. You could cut out 300, maybe even 400 pages of this book, and it would honestly be better. 1/4 of the book is just too much. Too much. Too many scenes. He repeats the same phrases too much for some reason. I don't get it why they see beep beep Richie or he trusts his fists. So yeah, there are some great horror scenes. It's a good horror book. I'm gonna tell you that it's scarier than The Shining probably in those FNAF books. But you've got the scene with Georgie. That was creepy. But it's not really scary. But I remember there are some scary parts here. I'm not sure which, but yeah, trust me on this. There are several scenes that actually scare you. So it's a scarier book than The Shining. But if you really like horror or you want to be scary, you can read it. But keep in mind that when you're reading this book, you're gonna be reading, and these interludes, it's too much, come on. I mean, of these interludes, maybe 10 of 40 of each section, maybe a quarter of each section is necessary to read, but there's too much background information, he describes too much. I mean, the first part, it's basically perfect of the book. I can't find anything wrong, and that's what... yeah, that's a bit less than 200 pages, but then part 2 of the childhood, that's also pretty good, but then at part 3 it starts slipping, going down, and then the 2 final parts, there are a lot of things that I don't really care for, and the interludes aren't that great either. So yeah, 8 out of 10, it's a good book. It has a lot of great scenes, but it has a lot of dull, okay scenes. So yeah, it's It's a mixed bag, this book. It's a mixed experience. So you're going to both be amazed and bored somehow. This is a unique book. I don't think I've read a book where I've enjoyed a lot of it and hated a lot of it. So yeah, 8 out of 10. That's my view of Stephen King. So, this was the Avid Reader's review of It, written by Stephen King in 1986. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys next time.